I want you to close your eyes and picture yourself. You're about to start a new journey. You're full of excitement. You're finally going to change your life. You've got the plan set out. You've got all the motivation. Now it's just time to get to it. Now you start. Day 1 goes well. Day 2, day 3, day 4. Maybe you do well and you get to week 1, week 2, week 3. But eventually you start to feel an overwhelming sense of resistance against you. Everything just becomes a lot harder to do. That motivation has just disappeared out of nowhere. And now it's becoming more and more difficult to do everything. And you eventually fall off the wagon, right? You start to realize that this journey isn't really about what you can do when you're most motivated, when you're at your best, but it's about what you can produce at your worst, right? Sound familiar? It certainly sounds like the story of my life. I start something new, or I just find like a newfound sense of motivation. I want to keep going and keep going and keep going, but I fall off eventually. It doesn't even take that long. Like on a good time, on a good run, I'll fall off after like 3 weeks or something. Right, now you want to figure out how to get past this point, because this is where the wheat is separated from the chaff. Right, this is where you start to realize. This is where all the poses are filtered out. This is where you start to realize who really wants it, and this happens everywhere. Everything, I'm talking about everything from like fitness to your career, anything you can think of, anything that's difficult. This is what happens, right? You start to experience that overwhelming sense of resistance, and you need to find a reason to keep going, right? You've heard people talk about finding your why and all that, but you just need to find a way to get past that. And how I'm going to explain this is I was reading Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, right? And he had a paragraph. I saw it was so amazing. I highlighted it and I posted it on my story, my Instagram story, because it was just so good, right? He was talking about how when he was trying out for the military, there's something called Hell Week, which is, as you can imagine, a week of hell. Like, it's just terrible. Most people don't make it through. And he was just taking us through the mental process of how he managed to make it through there. And the paragraph, he started it by saying that it's important to realize that all mental and physical anguish is finite. It's going to eventually stop, right? And all you need to do is find a way to just keep going a little bit by little bit. And he was saying that if you smile at the pain, you can watch the pain fade for a second or two. And if you can manage to string together enough seconds, you'll be able to last longer than your opponent thinks you can. And that is how you beat your opponent, and that's how you make it through. And it's a simple concept, but when you break it down, think about all the times you've just been doing anything difficult, even something as simple. I think the best analogy you can usually give people is physical anguish, right? When you're in the gym and you're like lifting that weight, or when you're running, if you've ever gone for a run, right, and you're just jogging and it's just sore and you just can't keep going, right? Like, you just need to get yourself past, like, it's not even like, if you seriously think about it, it's never anything ridiculous, right? I was also listening to a podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman. He was talking about how when you're running and you're about to quit, it's not physical tiredness, right? You've heard this before. You quit when you're only at like 40% of your capacity, right? Like, you can go so much longer than you think you can. Like, when you feel like you can't go any further, you've only done 40%. And what he was saying was that it's not physical pain or physical barrier that's been broken down that keeps you from going on. It's mental, right? It's you just quickly quit in your mind. You just quickly quit in your mind. You're like, stop. Like, think about whenever you've been doing anything difficult. You don't stop after something crazy. It happens in a split second. You literally, just for a split second, you're like telling yourself, I'm going to keep going, and then for a split second you stop and you're walking instantly, right? And the biggest problem with that is, if you've ever tried anything, I don't know if you've ever like put yourself through this mental anguish before, but like, if you try to do something physically difficult, but you don't give yourself like a stopping point, all right? If you go for a run, but you don't tell yourself when you're going to stop, when it starts to get difficult, you quit like this. You start walking, because there's no way you can see the finish line. There is no like end point for you. But whereas if you're running something and you're like, okay, I'm like 80% of the way done, let me just keep going. Let me just keep going little bit by little bit, right? You're able to keep going. It's like the example I've heard before, which is they'll do a study, right? And then they'll make people do like as many pull-ups as they can, or as many push-ups as they can, right? I'm gonna go with the pull-ups. Do as many pull-ups as they can, If you tell them to just do as many pull-ups as they can, this one person would have done like 16, right? And that's when you think like if you tell someone to do as many pull-ups as they can, they're going to stop immediately. They're going to stop when it's like as difficult as it can be. But then they do a separate experiment, and they tell them to do it. They give them like an aiming point. I think they'll tell them to do like 30 pull-ups, right? Now that same person that did 16 when you told them to do as many as they can, right? When you give them a goal of 30, they'll hit something like 24, 25 pull-ups. You see like massive difference. That's an extra 10 pull-ups on 16 pull-ups, right? That's like an 80% increase, right? And it's important, that's one of the most important things you can notice about like hitting your goals and just keeping on going. When you're in that moment where you're really struggling, it's important to give yourself like just a little, just something to aim towards, right? If I was to put it this way for you, right, all those times you've quit, like if you can think about all the times you've tried to just keep going, keep being consistent and disciplined, and then you stop when it gets hard, right? If I was to tell you that day that you were really struggling, if you just, and you quit, if you just managed to keep going for like the next 2 days, right? 2 days later, you'd be feeling amazing, right? Now, how does that sound, right? 2 days, all it takes is just 2 days of going through that anguish to be like consistent for like months, right? And actually change your life, like actually. Like if I was to tell you right now, are you gonna trade 2 days of like really, really, really difficult mental anguish in order to completely change your life? You'd snap my hand off for that, right? 2 days, what's that? It's nothing. But in the moment, it sucks because you don't know where you don't know, like you don't feel like it's gonna end. I think it's important for people to realize that it's eventually going to end, and it's not as long as you think it is. Like think about back to the running example. All it takes is a split second for you to just give up mentally and you stopped. If you're lifting weights and it's like really difficult and you're pushing, if you're like in the wrong state of mind, if you just like switch off for like a second, you drop the weight, right? And it's important to just keep going for that, just that little bit. Just give yourself something. And I think when you put it in the going back to "It Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins, when you put it in that line where it was like, if you smile, you can watch the pain vanish for a second or two. And if you can string together enough seconds, you can last longer than your opponent thinks you can. And that's how you win the battle. When he puts it that way, he's basically saying never give up. But like when he puts it that way, it's like just keep going little bit by little bit. Look at increments. Stop looking at like a massive picture. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this forever. Because in the moment it feels like the pain's going on forever. You just need to string together enough seconds to last through. If you just realize it's a very small portion, then you can get through that, right? And then another thing that I learned to like get past this is I was reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. I recommend you read that one. That is an amazing book, right? There was a quote that really stuck with me. It was, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, but you drop to the level of your systems," right? And it's just going back to thinking about the story I gave you at the beginning, right? You quickly realize it's not about what you can produce when you're at your best, but it's about what you can produce when you're at your worst, right? So you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. It's just important to set up your systems in a way that even at your worst, you're able to do. Like it's about lifting up the bar for the bare minimum, because the bare minimum is what gets you through. That's what determines how successful you're going to be. It's not your peaks, it's your troughs, right? Because if you're at your worst and you're still producing something significant, you're going to be unstoppable, my G. Like there's no stopping you. And that's what we need to aim towards, right? And yeah, that's basically all I've got for the video. Just let me know in the comments what you guys want me to make next, and yeah.